past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of destiny of a people with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood called slavery.
Greetings, and as always, welcome back. I hope you all had wonderful, blessed weekends. Israeli and Hamas negotiators begin indirect talks in Egypt as the IDF continues to bomb Gaza. Medical sources told Al Jazeera that at least 10 Palestinians have been killed so far today. And this while Hamas faces, quote, complete obliteration, end quote, if it clings to power in Gaza, warns President Trump as Israel and Hamas sent delegations to Egypt. What kind of negotiation is this if the U.S. is threatening one of the interested parties with complete obliteration? Is this negotiation or capitulation and surrender? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. I want to quickly take a look at a couple of today's headlines. First, Kamala Harris is still blaming Gaza protesters. Nearly 2 years into the Gaza genocide, the AP is still referring to the Israeli onslaught as a war and recently referred to it as a war in Israel. And nearly 1 year after the 2024 election defeated Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris, she's still at a loss as to why some Democrats were so upset at the Biden administration's funding of that genocide. What part of genocide either doesn't she understand, or what part of genocide is she okay with? In her book, she continues to play up her longtime pro-Israel bona fides. She recalls, as the Electronic Intifada has reported previously, her funding for the Jewish National Fund, which is a discriminatory organization contributing to the theft of Palestinian land. And lest anyone forget, she reminds readers of her long support for the Zionist colony. Quote, what I am not ambivalent about is Israel's security. As a young girl, I carried around a little blue box for the Jewish National Fund, soliciting support to plant trees in Israel, end quote. And here's what's very important to understand about that statement. And y'all can call it anti-Semitic. You can call it anti whatever you want to, if you want to. But international law is very clear on this issue. It's not a matter of Israeli security, because Israel is the occupying force. And international law is very, very clear on an occupying force does not have the standing. They don't have the moral validity. They cannot righteously make the claim of their security. Why? Because they're the occupying force. And for those that might want to debate whether or not Israel is in fact an occupying force, then you just need to answer the question, why is that region still referred to as the occupied territories? She then adds, quote, I believe Israel was right to respond to the atrocities of October 7th, but the ferocity of Netanyahu's response, the number of innocent Palestinian women and children killed, and his failure to prioritize the lives of the hostages had weakened Israel's moral position internationally and created angry dissent within Israel itself. And that statement is just as wrong as the previous statement for the very same reasons. So with that, when you're stuck in insanity, I guess you just can continue to be insane. Trump calls for impeachment of Ilhan Omar. He Thursday called for the impeachment of the congresswoman from Minnesota. Quote, I think she's terrible. I think she should be impeached, he told reporters. And this all because she resisted the idea that Charlie Kirk wanted to simply have civil debates. Now, many of you all may have read the piece I wrote a while back. Charlie Kirk's racist, xenophobic diatribes are not protected speech. And one of I guess this would be humorous if it weren't just so utterly wrong and pathetic, is you can quote Charlie Kirk himself. And so when you quote Charlie Kirk himself, then you have to ask yourself, well, what is it about a number of the things that he has said that brings up any type of debate? First of all, when the man says, quote, I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights, that's a prudent deal. It is rational. He said that on the 5th of April, 2023. When you say that, and I don't say this to in any way, shape, or form condone what happened to him, because I don't, but I think that statement does warrant the question. When you take that public position and then you become the victim of one of those gun deaths, and you say it's prudent and rational, then what are we to make of the fate that has befallen you? I think that's a rational question to ask. When Charlie Kirk says that if he gets on an airplane and sees a black pilot, he then asks himself, he hopes that pilot is qualified and not a beneficiary of racial preference. I don't understand how those types of statements are debatable. When he says it's happening all the time in urban America, prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people, that's a fact. It's happening more often. When he says that, Donald Trump, well, you may not want to ask him this question, but what part of that, first of all, since Charlie Kirk says it's a fact, then please present the data. And the second point is whether you're Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, what part of that statement do you support? What part of that statement do you back? What part of that statement adds any type of value to the political dialogue? Again, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. What part of that adds value to the political dialogue? I don't think any of it does. And understand the definition of fighting words. And this is from the Chaplinsky v. New Hampshire case. The legal concept of fighting words refers to words that by their nature, by their very utterance, inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. And here's, I think, the crux of the issue on this one. They are considered to have very little social value, and the government can prohibit them to prevent immediate violence and disorder. That's not political speech. Those comments have absolutely no social redeeming, and redeeming is my word, value. So I wish, as again, Donald Trump has brought this whole thing back up with calling for Congresswoman Omar to be impeached, which I don't actually think can happen. I think also actually she'd have to be recalled through a vote in Minnesota. I don't think, I'll have to check this, but I don't think that members of Congress can be impeached. This language has absolutely no redeeming value. Another story. Dominican Republic says it recovered cocaine from suspected drug boat strike. Officials in the DR said they recovered hundreds of cocaine packages from a speedboat destroyed by the U.S. military as part of the Trump administration's operation against drug trafficking. Dominican authorities, working with the U.S., said they gathered the packages from the remains of a vessel that authorities from both countries suspected to have been carrying a metric ton or 2,200 pounds of cocaine when it was hit by a U.S. airstrike some 80 nautical miles south of Beata Island. Well, here's my question there. The first question I had, actually, when I read the story was, or when I heard the story, before I read it, when I heard the story was, have they provided any evidence to support the claim of this incredibly large haul? And then when I opened the story, there is a picture. But I think those of us that are discerning listeners and those of us that are discerning readers, I think we have to ask ourselves, are the Dominican Republic officials that are backing Donald Trump's play, can they be trusted? Or are they paid puppets, paid parrots, paid dupes? Are they just coming forward because they're on the U.S. dole and they've been told by the administration that they need to back what were previously, up to this point, undocumented, unsupported, unevidenced claims by the administration? I'm not saying that they are, but I believe, understanding the history of the relationship between the Dominican Republic and the United States, that one needs to ask that question. In fact, Rampled since 01 says, I don't believe that story. Trump must have put pressure on them to say that. Again, I think it at least warrants the question. Let me say to you all that we're having some technical difficulty with my guest, and I hope that he is able to join us shortly. So in the interim, we shall just proceed, and y'all are stuck with me. So let me get back to the well, you know what? Let me quickly just make one more comment about Vice President Harris's book, which I have not read. I will admit that right off the top. So I'm not so much going to question, or my comments are not so much about her book as much as they are about what I've heard her say in interviews about the book and critiques that I have read by others who have read the book. So I need to establish that predicate right up front. What is her end game here? And the reason I ask that is because if she is either testing the waters in anticipation of, or let me not get ahead of myself. If she is testing the waters to make an assessment about the viability of another presidential bid, then I think she has the wrong set of advisors, and she may not be listening to the advisors that she has. Because the tack that she's taking seems to be, and I underscore seems to be because I haven't read the book, blame everyone else and take no responsibility for the horrible decisions that she made in the process. And so, for example, in fact, I make note of this in my piece. Charlie Kirk's racist, xenophobic rants are not protected speech. I make this point, and let me see if I can quickly put my hands on it. Because I make the point about AIPAC and the impact. Oh, no. You know what? It's not in that piece. It's in the piece, He Who Pays the Piper. That's where it is. It's in He Who Pays the Piper Calls the Tune. That's the piece where I make the point. And in that piece, He Who Pays the Piper Calls the Tune. The point of that, one of the points of that piece is that one of the big issues we as African Americans or people of color in this country have with our elected officials is that we don't control the officials that we elect. And I talk about open secret, the data from Open Secrets that talk about, according to the numbers for the 2023-2024 election cycle, based on Federal Election Commission's data, Representative Richie Torres from New York got $1,635,583 from the securities and investment industry and $536,000 from AIPAC. Representative Hakeem Jeffries received $866,425 from AIPAC. Gregory Meeks got $510,000 from a pro-Israel lobby group, and another $488,000 directly from AIPAC. According to a 2024 report from J Street, the J Street Political Action Committee, which is a political fundraising arm of the pro-Israeli advocacy, easy for you to say, advocacy group, announced it raised over $6 million for the Harris-Walz presidential campaign. So, as I say in my piece, it's important to understand that what is documented here is not illegal. This is pay-to-play politics in America, also known as He Who Pays the Piper Calls the Tune, and that this is a result of the decision in the Citizens United v. Federal Elections Commission case, where granting corporations and unions have the ability to use money as political speech. So as you look at where she's getting her money from, then you are able to understand the allegiance that she really wants to be sure you understand, that her allegiance lies with the Zionist genocidal government called Israel. And again, folks, you can say that's anti-Zionist if you want to. I mean, you can say it's anti-Semitic if you want to, but it is not. It is anti-Zionist. It is not anti-Semitic. And Carol Asbaram says, and Carol, this is a very good point. Going back to the drug boat story, this is a very good point, Carol. The boat was blown up and became a wall of fire, but only the bags of cocaine survived. Were the bags fireproof? Carol, that's an excellent question. And it's people like Carol who are members of the group supporting Connecting the Dots See, that's why y'all that's why y'all tune into this show. That's why y'all support this show, because y'all are smart like that. And so let me see if I can quickly, I can't post a picture. But Wall Street Journal. If you can, go to the Wall Street Journal and look at and Carol, you were reading my mind because I was going to get to this point a little later. Read the story this is from the 22nd of September. Dominican Republic says it recovered cocaine from suspected drug boat strike. And then look at the picture that accompanies the story. And these are perfectly wrapped, unsinged, incredibly clean packages of what they tell us are cocaine. And I go back again to Carol's point, because I watched Rachel Maddow recently, and as you know, she repeats herself 1,000 damn times. The boat was blown up and became a wall of fire, but only the bags of cocaine survived. Were the bags fireproof? This is, Carol, again, thank you very much. This is where I say all the time, you have to be a discerning reader and you have to be a discerning listener and ask yourself this: does the story make sense? Does the story make sense? I'm not saying there's a conspiracy here. I'm not saying that the members of the police, thank you, that look at those bags. Look at those bags. They're pristine. They're clean. The boat got hit by a missile and blew up in the ocean. But the cargo on the boat just floated away. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm saying the story doesn't make sense. And so pay attention to that. So anyway, the story doesn't make sense. Carol, thank you very much for that $5 super sticker. What about Julius Malema and South Africa being found guilty of a crime? Also, Sudan is still in crisis. I'm not quite sure what you if you could elaborate on that a little bit for me, because I'm not quite sure what direction you want me to go with that. So Carol, if you get a chance, and again, thank you very much for that super sticker. So getting back to the story that I opened with, if you remember last week, Donald Trump, standing there with Netanyahu next to him at the White House, released this 20-point peace plan. And as a result of this, negotiations were supposed to take place, and from what I understand, are taking place. Preliminary discussions are taking place in Egypt. But when you read the so-called peace plan, it's more of a capitulation, or requesting or demanding capitulation by Hamas, as opposed to anything that would come close to actually bringing about a peaceful resolution to the conflict. And, you know, when you go back, I'm going to try to connect the dot here. When you go back and listen to the demands of President Putin, as Donald Trump keeps talking about a peaceful resolution to the Ukrainian crisis, President Putin says, and I'll paraphrase, all of this is nice, but unless you address the fundamental issues that have brought about the conflict in the first place, we can't move forward. So when you look at this 20-point plan, and then you ask yourself, are these points getting to the crux of the problem, or are they merely A, kicking the can down the road, and B, declaring that the Palestinians just surrender and capitulate and continue this, God, how many years is it now? 60 some odd years of oppression? Because contrary to the dominant narrative, this conflict did not start 2 years ago. It didn't start on October 7th, as much as folks want you to believe that it did. That act by Hamas was a response to, and you know, whether it's 40 years, 45 years, 60 years, depending on who you ask, and depending on what point in history you want to consider the beginning of the conflict. I know this thing's been going on my entire life, and I'm 66. So those who want to use the action by Hamas on the 7th of October as though that's the starting point of the conflict don't understand the conflict, don't understand history, don't understand apartheid in Palestine, don't understand the Intifada, don't understand the Nakba. They have no clue of what's going on, but as important, if not more importantly, why it's going on. So as all of this is happening, what does Netanyahu say yesterday? Israel won't implement Trump's Gaza plan until Hamas releases all the hostages. He reportedly said Sunday that Israel will not implement any other point of the ceasefire plan until all the remaining captives are released. Quote, until the first clause, the release of all the hostages, living and dead, until the last of the hostages, all of them, is transferred to Israeli territory, we will not move on to any other clause. Well, if this is supposed to be a negotiation, coming to the table with the statement, I'm not moving until X or Y, you're not negotiating in good faith. Which leads me to the next question. How is Hamas supposed to trust Israel? When just about 10 days ago, what did Israel do? There were Hamas negotiators in Qatar supposedly there to engage in developing the pre-negotiation strategies, and Israel dropped a bomb on them, murdered them, and then just went, oh, sorry, my bad. So how are Hamas, which, by the way, the folks engaged in this, as I understand it, are the political wing, not the military wing. Remember, there are two elements of, I would say it would be analogous to the State Department and the Defense Department. How is Hamas? I don't care. Well, no, you know what? Let me not say that. Let me put it this way. Let me ask the question. What type of guarantees can the Zionist government of Israel, the genocidal, murderous government of Israel, what type of guarantees can they provide that can be trusted? And some of y'all might come back with the answer, well, the United States is going to be the co-sponsor of all of this, and the United States is going to be the guarantor of this. Well, then that begs the question, how do you trust the United States when General Qasem Soleimani was in Iraq on a peace mission on behalf, I believe, or working in concert with the United States to facilitate rapprochement between the Saudis and Iran, and the United States pushed the button on him. So I'm wondering, how do you trust Israel? What kind of guarantees can they give where they, in fact, could be trusted? And if the United States is the one raising its hand saying, oh, you can trust them because they're with me. Oh, I got them. Oh, well, then how do we trust you? And Carol, well, first of all, before I get to Carol, MV Marabel, thank you. Thank you as a new member. Greatly appreciate it. Carol, you'll appreciate this question. If you go back to Rhodesia, when Mugabe was fighting for the freedom of the Rhodesians, which we know now, the people of Zimbabwe. It was called the Lancaster House Agreement. And the agreement was between Britain and Mugabe. Might have been Margaret Thatcher. I think it was either John Major or Margaret Thatcher. Can't remember which one. Doesn't really matter. The Prime Minister of Britain at the time. And the issue centered around land reclamation. As they had agreed to surrender to Mugabe, the question became, what are we going to do with all of these white settler farmers and their land? And pay attention to this, because Mugabe could very easily have said, get out of town by sundown. And those that haven't left, we'll deal with you. And it won't be pleasant. We'll just dig a lot of ditches and fill them with bodies. He could have said that. He didn't say it, and he didn't do it. The agreement was that the white settler farmers in Zimbabwe would be paid for their land if they chose to leave the country. They would be paid for their land, and Britain would pay them. I think it was, if they chose to stay, they could stay, and other arrangements would be worked out, but their lives would not be in jeopardy. And I repeat, Mugabe very easily could have massacred a whole bunch of folks, but he knew that wasn't a smart move to make. So when the white settler farmers decide they want their money, they call Britain, and Jimmy Carter co-signed the agreement. Sounds a lot like Palestine. The United States co-signing the play. But that takes me to my question: how can you trust Israel, and how in the hell can you trust the United States? So when the white Rhodesians went to get their money, I think it might have been, but now you have a change in administrations. I think it's Thatcher isn't there, and Carter has been replaced by Ronald Reagan. They say, no, we ain't paying you. We're not paying you. And so they go to Mugabe and they say, hey, man, where's our money? Mugabe said, you need to call Britain because I don't have your money. And if Britain doesn't answer the phone, call the United States, because Jimmy Carter told us he'd have your money. Ronald Reagan said, ain't doing it. So that's just, if we connect these dots, and Carol, I hope you appreciate that historical reference. I know you do. Folks, I'll ask this. In fact, let me ask this question. Let me ask this question to my guest. My guest is a liberation theologian, educator, and political activist. He's chairperson of Organization for the Victory of the People, OVP, based in Guyana. He's a member of the Governing Council of the Global Pan-African Movement and an executive member of the Caribbean Pan-African Network, CPAN. Gerald Perreira, welcome back, my brother. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, my brother. We had a problem. We had a huge power failure. So
Well, thank you for your perseverance, and I appreciate you joining me.
Yes.
The question I was about to pose, I'll pose to you. As we look at the alleged beginning of these peace, and I put that in quotes, negotiations between Hamas and the Zionist government of Israel, my question was, based upon the history, how do you trust Israel? How do you trust the United States? How does Hamas trust Israel? How does Hamas trust the United States? What kind of guarantees can Israel give that other than maybe putting his firstborn child up for grabs? But we know how even with that, we know how the Israelis feel about captives. Yeah. And so they don't care about captives. Yeah. So with that being said, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for having me, my brother. I love the way you connected the dots, and I love the way you did it when you pointed out about Mugabe And Zimbabwe, when, you know, the transition, when Ian Smith, after the liberation movement, took power under Mugabe, and the agreements they had, the Lancaster agreements and all of that, and Britain backed out of it. Britain backed out at that time when they were praising Mugabe because he agreed to certain things. But the minute Mugabe started talking about the land, because the war vets were pressing for land, suddenly he became a big demon. But
wait a minute. Brilliant point. Because I remember in the Western press, I remember reading in the New York Times, I remember reading in the Washington Post, I remember listening to NBC News.
Correct.
Robert Mugabe was the perfect display of democracy in an African country.
That's right. You're absolutely right. But the moment he touched the land issue, he became a demon.
Exactly.
Now, if you look, and history is important, history is a weapon, it's important. History, we cannot understand the present without understanding the past. We cannot. Right? Now, if you look, you know, I mentioned this some time ago. Rosemary Radford Reuter, a theologian, said that the West, the Anglo-Saxon nations, the North Atlantic, they were able to conquer the world, not because they were morally superior or more intelligent or what, but she said that they were able, the way they utilized the 3 Ds, that's deception, and then they destroyed and dominate, the 3 Ds. If you look at them and you go right back, you will see that the Anglo-Saxon nations of the West, they have been deceivers. You look at what they did to the indigenous people of what is called the United States today, and what all those treaties that they entered into, what they did. They broke everyone. Now, on the issue of Israel and the United States, if you look at it, and I've been arguing this for some time, and I think Hamas did recognize this when Hamas, this was one of the major things that issues that Hamas had, the disagreement with the PLO. The PLO, but more essentially Fatah, which was headed by Arafat, which was the largest formation in the PLO. Because there was a group called the Rejectionist Front that rejected a lot of the positions of Fatah and Arafat. That was made up of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command. That was people like George Habash, Naif Hawatmeh, and Ahmed Jibril. You know, they were getting the backing of Syria and certain radical revolutionary Arab regimes like Libya under the time of Muammar Gaddafi. The Rejectionist Front. If you go back to it, you will see that there was 2 faces of Zionism. The soft face with people like Yitzhak Shamir and Simon Peres and them. And then you have the hard face of Zionism that you're witnessing today. The Zionists never agreed. They were never committed to a 2-state solution. Never. They were never committed to it. Or to a Palestinian, independent Palestinian state. Never. This was all part of the string. They just carry on. They just were fooling, misleading the PLO and the world all these for many decades. But, you know, they played it. All when they met with Clinton and in Egypt to sign the various accords. And so they did not, they were never committed to it. But the softer face was just misleading the world and misleading the Palestinian Arab world. But you're seeing the hard faces telling you, no, Palestinians, they want to destroy. This is the expansion to expand, to take over Gaza and to occupy other parts of the other lands in the so-called, in the Arab world. And Syria is part of that project. Lebanon is part of it, as well as Gaza, and not only Gaza by extension, all Palestine. Gaddafi warned the Arab world about this years ago. He said this is not just about Palestine. This is about Arab world as well. And he went on, extension, Africa. And there is hard evidence to prove that the Zionists on the West are also extending their reach into the Sahel to destabilize those countries in the Sahel. The three countries that constitute the Sahel countries. 80% of the so-called jihadists in the Sahel countries are not from, and the governments of these countries have made that point clear. The spokesman, the brother who represented I think Niger at the UN General Assembly, said these people are not Niger, they're not from the Sahel, right? Many of them are from other parts of the world, from the former Soviet republics like Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Uyghurs from China and all of that. Like ISIL, 85% of ISIL members were not Arabs or people from that part of the world. But what I'm saying, they're using these people and they're working with the Zionists. In fact, there's evidence emerging that the Zionists are trying to, they've already created militias in Gaza to take the fight to Hamas. So this is what they did in Syria. They used these groups to overthrow the Assad regime. So the weaponry that was coming from Iran to help Hezbollah and to help Hamas, and so that is being shut down. But it is, I mean, what Trump is a deceiver, Trump is a barefaced liar, because Orwell spoke about war being peace and and slavery, freedom being slavery, as well as ignorance is strength. And this is what we are seeing, the naked face. This is fascism. This is downright fascism we're witnessing. And the whole thing about Trump telling Israel to stop the bombing, these guys, the two of them, Netanyahu and Trump, have this thing all worked out. Because the idea is they want Hamas to release the hostages, and there is no guarantee then Hamas will, then Israel is going to start bombing again. Hamas is stuck between a rock and a hard place, because they have to make, 2 years now. And Israel, the objective of the Israeli racist regime, apartheid regime, was to destroy, annihilate Hamas, and they've not been able to do that. Hamas is destroying Israeli tanks. Their snipers are taking out Israeli soldiers. So they realize that Hamas is going nowhere. So they're slaughtering, since Hamas is of the people. So they're slaughtering the people. And that's their idea, their way of trying to destroy Hamas, by destroying, committing the genocide against indigenous people. But this is a game they're playing. Neither Trump nor Netanyahu, the hardcore Zionists, are committed to having a free and independent Palestine. The two-state solution is off the table. It has been a farce for years, and there were people who knew about it. And they had opposed, because I was in Libya years ago when I listened to Abu Musa and members of the Rejectionist Front speaking. And they said a lot of things that, the things that they've said was just, incredible. The way the Zionists have been working with the United States and all of that. So the various U.S. administrations were aware over the decades that the Israelis were never committed to a two-state solution. Never.
Let me ask you this, because our time is short for today. I don't hear anybody talking about Yemen in this, and Ansar Allah. I don't understand how Israel could even present the false front of, we've reached an agreement, we've reached a peace agreement, unless somebody's talking to Ansar Allah, because they're sending missiles.
Correct. Ansar Allah is saying that once Israel continues its policy of genocide, they are going to resist, and they're shooting missiles at Israel, and they will continue that. And the Ansar Allah is a very strong a very strong organization.
Formidable force.
Yeah, that's right. And I want to say this, brother, and I don't get into the Sunni Shia divide.
Right.
But apart from Hamas, which is Sunni, they fight the resistance. The strength of the resistance is coming from movements that are Shia, Hezbollah, Ansarullah, and Iran. Iran is not Arab, Iran is Persian.
Right.
And look at the price Iran paid for standing up for the Palestinian people and for Yemen and Ansarullah. And the Sunni Muslims, the ones who like to, who are very comfortable, they don't mind having alliances with the Zionists and the imperialists. But when it comes to building an alliance other than Hamas with those organizations I mentioned, they have a problem. And this is an elephant in the room that needs to be identified. I mean, look at the price that Hezbollah paid, and Naim Qasim, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, made it clear. He said, Hezbollah will not give up their weapons. That's like calling on someone to commit suicide. They're not going to give up their weapons. The minute Hezbollah give up their weapons, Israel will occupy Lebanon, and the black flag of ISIS and the bogus jihadists in Syria will fly in Lebanon. And they're happy to work with the Zionists to finish off Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is backing Hamas.
Let me add final question for you. Different story. I opened talking about the story that the Dominican Republic says that it has recovered cocaine from the suspected drug boat. And they've shown this photograph of these pristine packages of what is in fact, if we can put that back up, if we can there. Anyway, I asked the question, understanding the relationship between the Dominican Republic and the United States, could anybody trust anything that the Dominican Republic says as it relates to this story?
Well, look at, Guyana has signed a number of agreements, deals, entered into the number of arrangement, economic and trade arrangement on energy, with the electricity, the power station, and so with Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic, look at the way the Dominican Republic treats Haitians.
Yes.
They have been
incredibly racist country.
Incredibly that's racist. Right. Yes, that's right. They treat the Haitians. And I do not believe anything the government of the Dominican Republic present to us about those boats carrying cocaine. The drugs are not coming from Venezuela. The drugs are not coming from Venezuela. And right now, even fishermen from Trinidad are not venturing out. They're not going out because they're afraid that they will be targeted. Just think about it. One boat went through a particular route and was blown up. A second boat went, it happened, the third. The fourth one too. This is not boats carrying drugs. This is well orchestrated plan. This is about regime change in Venezuela. And they're using this thing about the war and drugs and all of that. And there's a very good, as a brother said, Trump is wants to set the Caribbean afire.
There we go.
Yeah.
So allegedly, these
and Guyana, the regime in Guyana and the government in Trinidad are working their hand in hand with the United States, with the Trump administration, to destabilize this region. They are prepared. Yeah.
And now Trump, 2 points. One, these packages were allegedly on a boat that was struck by a missile, and these things look like they just came from the department store.
Yeah.
They are. So the other point is, I heard Donald Trump say yesterday, I don't remember what day he said it, but I heard it yesterday. He said, they're not transporting drugs through the water anymore. Now they're coming over land. And when I heard him say that, I said, oh, so all you're doing now is trying to shift the focus to justify a land invasion of Venezuela.
That's the objective. That's the objective. But you see, it's time. I see Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez from St. Vincent, the Grenadines, came out. He was very strong.
Yes.
But the voice CARICOM the CARICOM governments need to take a strong position on this issue. This is about regime change, and the governments of Guyana and the United States are facilitating the United States in carrying out their objective of regime change. In fact, Vice President Barrett Jagdeo said, this man actually said that Venezuela is the threat to the Caribbean being a zone of peace. I mean, it's just unbelievable. These guys, and we use that term, these two governments, you can see, are just running dogs. That's what they are, running dogs of U.S. imperialism. And it's going to backfire, because once they allow the United States to use Guyana and Trinidad as launching pads for aggression, it's going to spill over. And we have put the government on notice, because, as we said, the tables turn and dynamics do shift. And what they're doing is trampling on the sovereignty and independence of our country. How can the United States tell the people of Guyana that they're here, they're going to protect Guyana from Venezuela, and these are the people who are enabling the genocide against the Palestinian people? You cannot stop Israel from pursuing its policy of genocide, but you are coming to protect Guyana. You're coming to protect and take control and protect the oil and gas. That is what it's about.
That's it.
And bring about regime. You already have a puppet client regime in Guyana. And notice Trinidad, the Americans have reversed some arrangement, and now Trinidad will go ahead to have some agreement, some oil agreement with the United States. So both of these are client regimes, and CARICOM is split.
Brother Gerald Perreira, thank you. I greatly appreciate your effort. In fact, why don't we, if you can you join me Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we'll pick this up. We'll pick this up on Thursday.
Okay, my brother.
And hopefully the power will be on.
Yes.
My brother. Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, all the best, my brother.
Thank you, man. And Aziz says, I can't believe I was such a fool when I bought the mainstream media propaganda about Mugabe. Laugh out loud. How things change. Hey, that whole anti-Mugabe thing, man, that was a lie from the get-go. Again, because I remember very clearly when he was heralded as the poster child for this is how democracy in Africa is supposed to work. That was the line. And when he said, look, we are reclaiming our land. We have the documents signed by the parties that are going to reimburse you for your property. Go talk to them. That's when the script flipped. And he went from being the prime example of democracy to the villain that he remained until he passed.
That's right.
And that's not, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that he was perfect, because nobody is. No. But you can't negate that fact. You can pull up anything on him. And then one more thing. Yeah. There's a reason why you never heard in all the years that he came to the UN, You never heard Robert Mugabe speak. And the reason is because he spoke perfect English. Didn't need a translator. Didn't need anybody to interpret what he was saying. He had been educated in British schools.
Oh, he was highly educated.
He was a brilliant man. And so my point is, they were not going to allow Robert Mugabe to tell his side of the story before the world audience. Folks,
well,
go ahead.
One of the things he did, he offered elements, troops from the 5th Brigade to Muammar Gaddafi. He did. Yeah.
Brother Gerald Perreira, thank you very much, man. Greatly appreciate it.
Okay,
folks, thank you all so much for joining me today. Even with the technical glitches, I think we got down today. New episode tomorrow. Brother Tom Porter is going to join us tomorrow. Please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here. We connect the dots. Any of you all out there thought to connect what's happening in Gaza to what happened in Zimbabwe? A couple of y'all probably did, but most of you didn't. And that's why you watch the show. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.